Hi everyone, it's David from Automotive Press. As you know, I go and visit many factories around the world, including Toyota, Mazda, Nissan, Honda, even some of the North American brands as well. But of all the factories I visited, Mazda impressed me the most, just because they have some of the latest technology and latest method for producing some of the best cars in the world. In fact, I was in Japan last year and this year visiting a number of Mazda factories, and I saw this CX-90 being built, and I can attest to the fact that they have the most advanced, the most agile manufacturing system in the world that produce some of the best quality vehicles in the world. But today I want to talk about something else about the Mazda, because the CX-90 is by far the most fun to drive, best handling three-row SUV out there. Welcome back. Now before I go too far and talk about the 5 reasons why I believe the CX-90 is in fact the most fun to drive three-row SUV in this price range, I want to mention that this particular model I'm driving is a plug-in hybrid version, and they don't have that much competitors in terms of three-row plug-in hybrids in North America. There's some European brands like Volvo that offer three-row SUVs, and we also have a Mitsubishi Outlander plug-in hybrid that has three-row seats as well. But for the most part, they aren't competitors to this particular version. So for example, Toyota Corolla Highlander, which will be the closest competitor to this one, does offer hybrid in the form of normal hybrid and also hybrid max, but they don't offer plug-in hybrid unless you buy the more expensive Lexus TX, which does offer plug-in hybrid. So again, in this price range, there are really not too many competitors to begin with. But let me get back and talk to you about the reason why, regardless of which model you buy in the Mazda CX-90 lineup, this is the one you're going to have the most fun. And the first reason why is the steering feel. As you know, I talk a lot about steering feel in my reviews because most reviewers don't even mention it. And this is not about the handling per se, which I will get to it in a second. But I'm talking about the feedback process. Most automakers have ignored completely the method or the mechanism in which the road speaks to you. And what I mean by that is that when you drive, I want to be able to feel the turning, I want to be able to feel the road. Even if there's pebbles or rough roads on the road, I want that communication to come straight to my hands. And many engineers just cannot figure out how to do that exactly, simply because these days we have electric steering wheel, not hydraulic power steering, and so therefore by design, it is very difficult to get the actual transmission of the feel from a road to the steering. It's just numbed out because of the electric motor and where they're located. But Mazda was able to figure out a method similar to Porsche, in which they make sure that electric motor for the steering is located away from the steering, further down into the actual steering mechanism, and that provides more direct feedback. So I can feel the road, the steering is a little bit heavier, especially if I put it in the sports mode, and then like I said, when I make a turn, like this right now, I can feel a bit of a resistance and a feedback to the steering, just like in the old days when we used to have hydraulic power steering. That simply does not exist with almost every other manufacturers out there, except for Porsche, which has figured out a way to provide that feedback. So aside from Porsche, the only other brands that have spent this amount of time getting the right feedback and the right feel for steering is Mazda. And I know here in Canada we say Mazda, in the US you guys say Mazda, but in Japan you say Mazda. So I don't really care how we call it. I live in Canada, so I'm going to continue to say Mazda. But anyhow, that's the first reason why the CX-90 is more fun to drive than anything out there, even if you compare it to a two-row SUV, because of the way steering feels in my hands. Now the second reason is closely related to the first one, and it's to do with the handling. Handling, not to be confused with the steering feel. Steering feel, which I just talked about, is simply how I communicate with the road through the steering mechanism, but the handling is the entire feel of the vehicle when I'm driving around corners, curvy roads, and when I make rapid movements like this. Now I'm in a residential area right now, so I'm not going to drive fast, but the entire mechanism designed to keep the car flat, stable, and also giving you a progressive feel when you make quick turns, all relate to the feel of a great handling car. Once again, not too many three-row SUVs are able to provide a good handling just because they're not designed for that reason. But with Mazda, they took their time to engineer correctly. In other words, this three-row SUV was designed from the ground up to be a good handling car. One of the reasons why is that actual all-wheel drive mechanism is very much rear wheel biased, which means for the most part, there's more torque and power going to the rear wheels than the front, unless there's a slippage, like in the winter condition, then the actual torque will begin to shift front and back. But by moving the power to the rear instead of the front, under normal circumstances, you get a much better feel on the road because the car feels a little bit more stable around the corners. But you also don't want too much bias toward the rear wheels because you can lose traction when you're going around really tight corners. So Mazda was able to create the right balance in terms of having the rear bias, but also having some power going to the front, and then adjusting that based on the road condition, and that along with a very calibrated, sporty suspension mechanism give you some of the best handling on the road. If you compare to, let's say, Grand Highlander, that one is definitely tuned for a softer feel, and therefore it's very refined and comfortable, but not all that fun to drive when you take it up on the mountainous road and curvy roads. But this one begs to be taken on a curvy road just because of the way the whole thing is designed. The third reason why this is the most fun to drive SUV out there is the fact that the ride goes along with good steering and good handling. In fact, it is a stiff suspension, stiffer than most people would like it, but because of a stiff suspension, it only adds to the agility and fun to drive factor. If you want to buy an SUV with a really soft, cushy feel, this isn't the right car for you. But if you want one that gives you a stable ride, it's the one that stays flat around corners, and it's not losing composure over bumpy road, well, the Mazda CX-90 is definitely the right one. So I think the fact that the ride is somewhat stiff and firm only adds to this whole notion that the CX-90 is designed to be a fun to drive SUV, a true sports SUV, if you will, and not really going after some of the softer, more conservative market, because there's plenty of SUVs out there for that. Anyway, so that's my third reason. The fourth reason why I really enjoy driving the Mazda CX-90 is a powertrain. Now, this particular model is a plug-in hybrid. It has a normal, naturally aspirated 2.5-liter engine combined with electric motors with an 8-speed automatic transmission to give you 323 horsepower, which is actually more than the gasoline version of a CX-90, and that's the inline 6. But more than that, the actual combination of the electric motors and the naturally aspirated engine give you that natural organic feel that is maybe absent in many other SUV out there. For example, if you were to compare this to the Grand Highlander Hybrid Max, that one has plenty of power and torque as well, but the four-cylinder feels a little bit busy in that particular case, and you can feel the noise and a bit of a vibration coming through. Whereas with the CX-90, because the electric motor is working in conjunction with that engine, it's absolutely quiet and performs flawlessly. I think the way Mazda engineered this vehicle, it is perfect for driving fun because the electric motor and the engine and everything works seamlessly. And when you step on it, you still get a fair amount of kick because of the torque from the electric motor, but you still get the naturally aspirated engine working smoothly. And I find that to be truly pleasant. I actually prefer the plug-in hybrid version of the CX-90 versus the inline 6 in terms of refinement and smoothness. Although I will admit that the inline 6 version has some of that gut feel or the sports car feel that you might crave. But regardless of which powertrain you might pick, the CX-90 gives you plenty of power and torque, and is really well integrated with the steering, the handling, and the ride to maximize the fun to drive factor. The fifth and the final reason is something that sometimes I can't explain because it's not truly logical. Yes, the CX-90 has a great powertrain, has a great ride, good steering feel, and as I mentioned, good handling. But at the end of the day, I ask myself when I drive vehicles back to back every week, do I enjoy driving it? Do I want to drive it again? And do I want to take it to curvy road or mountainous road? If the answer is yes, I know for a fact that that car has a really good fun to drive factor. And that is the case with the CX-90 because it has such a good agility. Many other cars in this price range have a great powertrain, maybe even good power and torque, and sometimes good suspension, but somehow I don't really enjoy driving it. Whereas with the CX-90, the minute I drive it, the minute I take it on the road, I say, well, this is a car I actually want to own because it has a good combination of fun to drive factor mixed in with a refinement and smoothness that give you an overall feeling of a beautiful vehicle. I think this vehicle is more agile than anything else out there, especially with a three-row SUV, because most three-row SUVs are a bit bloated and too soft and too cumbersome around corners, whereas this one simply handles everything with ease in a beautiful way. So my conclusion is that if you want to drive the best handling, most fun to drive three-row SUV, I don't think you need to look anywhere else. And if you want to actually specifically look for a plug-in hybrid model, well, then you actually don't have any choice, because the only other three-row SUVs with a plug-in hybrid is Mitsubishi Outlander plug-in hybrid in a similar price range. And that one is also a really good choice too, but there's no question that this one outperforms the Outlander in terms of how fun to drive it is on the road. So as you know, I've done lots of videos on Mazda CX-90, and I want to address one more final thing before I sign off, which is an elephant in the room, because a lot of people have asked me about what Ahmed at the Car Care Nut have said about the CX-90 in general, in the sense that it is difficult to service, and in some cases you have to take the engine apart or take the engine off the vehicle for servicing. But for things like timing chain, you don't have to change that for a very long time, possibly never, if you're only keeping the car for 3 to 5 years, or maybe even up to 7 to 8 years. So to me, it's a non-issue, because most BMWs have the same issue and same challenge. And for an engineer like myself, to be honest, if you have to take the engine out of the bay, well, it's actually not a big deal. Maybe it's half an hour to 45 minutes of work at the most, and you can put it back without too much trouble. Most mechanics are trained to do that, and it is not taking the whole car apart. So I think you can be rest assured that unless you're keeping this car for 20, 30 years, that issue is a non-issue from my perspective. But yes, if you want to keep it for a very long time and you don't want to have to deal with the hassle of taking the engine off in the event that the timing chain have to be replaced, then yes, it's something to think about. Anyway, that's my conclusion for the Mazda CX-90. I hope you enjoyed my video. If you did, I would appreciate if you can give me a thumbs up, make some comments, and I will truly be thankful if you can also subscribe as well. Until next video, I'm signing off for now. Thank you so much.